2014. I think I got that right this time. It's time to begin the Albany School Board of Education meeting. We will start with roll call.
Member Rosenbaum?
Here.
Member Lowe?
Here.
Member Black?
Here.
Vice President Maris?
Here. For those who wish to, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Earlier this evening, the board met in closed session, and the board took the following action in closed session. We approved the stipulated agreements for student number 2013-14-03, 19-12, and student 2013-14-04, 10-8. And the board approved the revised stipulation agreement for student number 2013-14-05, 1013. I believe we need to discuss the agenda. I believe one item is to be pulled, and then the board can talk about other items as well.
Yes, Board President, I'd like to pull under the under the review and action items, number 8F, the independent contractor agreement with Pantano Demolition. I'd also like to draw to the board's attention that under the consent calendar, under business services, items D and E have been revised, and you have copies of those, and there are copies in the back of the room of those revised items. They were very minor changes.
Okay. Does the board, any board members wish to comment on the changes on the agenda?
I'll move the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
So the agenda as amended pulls item 8F, is that correct?
That is correct.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we'll move next to the consent calendar, and if anyone on the board wishes to pull a consent calendar item, you're welcome to. Also, anyone in the public wishes to pull an item, but we'll hear from the board first. Board member Rosenbaum.
I have a question on item 1C and 3C.
Any other items? Okay. So, Mr. Rosenbaum, go ahead with your comments on item 1A and 1C.
This is more district history. On 1C, it's an agreement to provide experiences between us and San Francisco State. What I didn't see in the agreement was any mention of supervision from staff from San Francisco State. And this has been a historical problem with this particular program, in that there's been no support on site from this particular university. So I was wondering if that's been part of the discussion or not. And I'm sorry I was out of town and I didn't get these to you on time, but I would like to see something in there, because in the past, we've had no support from San Francisco State. Now, I'm going back a number of years, and I'm hoping that there's a difference. But there's nothing in that agreement that talks about any responsibility except for our staff.
Okay, I'm not aware that there was any discussion regarding that concern.
Is that something we can address with San Francisco State? I actually met with them maybe 8 years ago and voiced that complaint.
That's certainly something I can refer to our Human Resources Department to follow up.
Yeah, because it'll put an undue strain not only on our site teachers, but on our site administrators.
Ron, are you proposing we pull the item and not?
I would be more comfortable pulling the item and bringing it back after making sure that there's been a change in attitude in
I
that
don't think
program.
there's any urgency to this
Okay.
item, so we could pull it and bring
Is that
it
fair?
back after we find out more about that.
It's also incredibly weighty on the student teachers themselves without that kind of support.
So the rest of the board support?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think,
We're not going to vote on it yet.
right, I think once it's been pulled, then we have to vote on it as an action item separately, at which time we can,
We can just do the consent calendar without it. We
Yes.
can approve it without.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that.
So
And
it
your
sounds like
sec-
we have a consensus, which is sort of an
Sure.
action anyway.
Um,
On 3C, just a brief, 3C talks about a list, and the list is missing.
Sorry.
So can we just get a copy of that?
The list is going to basically say various books. We didn't have the staff to do a complete
got it.
inventory. Many of the books that I've found at McGregor are from the adult ed program.
Right.
Some of the books, I've had both the middle school and the high school librarians out to review what was available, and most of the books are not in the condition that would be acceptable at our libraries.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, the high school has found some obsolete math textbooks that they would like to also.
Yeah, the only reason I asked the question is that the actual wording says, see the attached list.
I apologize.
It wasn't
Okay.
there. It's not, it's fine.
I can
you caught that? I
provide you
missed
with,
that one.
but that's a brief summary. And then there are some miscellaneous pieces of furniture that are no longer usable at
Yeah,
McGregor,
I assumed that.
as I'm cleaning out storerooms and stuff.
And I'm fine with it. I just
Okay.
was wondering if there actually was a list.
Does anyone in the public wish to pull an item from the consent? All right, bring it back to board. And do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the corrections or the adjustment that Member Rosenbaum requested?
I'll
Yeah.
move that we approve the consent calendar with item 1C removed and with the replacement of these 3 printed items for the ones that are in the board packet.
A second.
I'll request a roll call vote, please.
Roll call?
Member Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Member Lowe? Aye. Member Black?
I need to abstain from checks number 503-97281, 503-98180, 503-99304, 504-01460, 504-01568, 504-18610. Otherwise, aye.
Vice President Maris?
Very good. I approve the consent calendar. Aye. So the consent calendar passes. We move on to item 5, the student board report, and I don't believe we have students to report. So next item will be item 6, staff report on the Albany mentoring program. Staff?
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jason Matlin. He is the teacher on special assignment for the Safe and Inclusive Schools. And I've asked him to co-present with me tonight on the Albany mentoring program because he's the one doing a lot of the coordination for the project. You may remember that this is a program that started last year. Let's see if so I'm going to let Jason start.
So it was formed in 2012, so this is the second year it's been in effect. It was at Ocean View last year, at the middle school last year. This
Get
past,
a little closer to the mic.
sure, this
Or you
past
can move
year.
the mic up.
Do you mind if, okay.
That might work better.
Was it? Okay. So it was at Ocean View last year and Albany Middle School last year. And this year it's been at Ocean View and at Cornell. It was formed last year to help African American and Latino students with the goal of helping them succeed in school. It grew out of also some conversations about the achievement gap. Free tutoring is offered 3 days a week to the core group of kids who are mentored by the older kids. I'll get to that in a second. So each of the elementary participant of the AMP program is paired with an older boy. and they serve as their mentors. The mentors and mentees participate in fun group activities every other week, and they also do quarterly activities. This past year we went to Albany Bowl and then also had a picnic at Memorial Park. So at Cornell this year, it started in January. There were 4 third grade Latino and African American boys who were the core members of the group. And all 4 boys regularly attended tutoring sessions 3 times a week from January all the way through May. And Rebecca Springer and Meredith Rogers were the lead teachers.
Not at Cornell.
I'm sorry, Ashley Busby was the lead teacher at Cornell with that group. The mentors would come in every other week, and they were, so the third graders would meet with their mentors who were 2 fourth graders and 2 fifth graders. And during lunch, they would do team building exercises. They'd have discussions about students' social lives, any challenges they'd have at school. And the mentor coordinator for this site was Ken Hirano. And at Ocean View, there were 3 third grade Latino and African American boys and 3 fourth grade Latino and African American boys. And all 6 boys were in AMP the previous year. All of the boys attended, just like Cornell, 3 tutoring sessions every single week from September through May. Ocean View had the benefit of getting started a few months earlier. And the mentors for this group, 2 fourth graders were paired up with third graders, and then with 2 of the third graders, and then the fifth graders were split amongst the fourth graders and then 1 third grader. And again, activities included lunchtime discussions, activities, and when they all got together with me and also with Cornell, we did those quarterly activities. So in the fall and winter of 2013, in the spring of 2014, all AMP students, except for 1 at OV, took the DRA. It's a standardized measure of reading ability. All students showed significant improvement so that you can read the data. A score that's in the 20s is equal to reading at second grade level, and then in the 30s for third grade level. So here are the Cornell DRA scores. All of these, all of the Cornell students are in third grade, and this shows their improvement from their September, October, actually, no, I'm sorry, in Cornell, this was their January DRA score all the way to the spring, which was in May. And you can see their growth in that time. And then Ocean View, this was the group that took the DRA earlier in September, and then again in the spring. And the first 3 were third graders, and the last 2 were fourth graders. And again, you can see the growth.
Did we have any measure in mathematics at all?
No, they gave some tests, but they didn't give a standardized math test.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to the teachers who led these groups, and they reported that their math grades and their ability improved. Just also what I observed from watching the groups, not only in the tutoring sessions, but then when they were all together, it seemed like they all did really benefit from this. Rebecca Springer, Meredith Rogers, and Ashley Busby did an incredible job tutoring them, and these kids were really well directed and seemed to be really improving.
Great, thanks.
Yep. All the AMP students indicated that they would like to continue with the tutoring, and all the fourth grade mentors have expressed a desire to return to AMP next year.
And that
So
concludes
that's-
generally the report.
Any comments from the board? Paul?
Okay, I have no doubt that this is beneficial both to the mentors and the mentees. But I would be curious, of course, we would hope that any student's scores would improve over the course of a year. So I know it's a small sample, and we don't really have a control group in our schools, but is there any data from the program overall to show how these kids might compare to kids who are not in the program but were comparable?
I don't have that here to show you how they'd stack up against other kids taking the DRA, the same test at the same time. Just based on my own personal observation and having worked with kids that age for many years, my I guess my gut feeling is that they did improve more than the average kid because of all that attention.
But I think we can take a look at the data that we do have and see if we can find some comparable students to see at each school to see what a student who didn't benefit from the tutoring, what kind of progress they might have
It
made.
would be interesting to see, and certainly if we found there was evidence that there was improvement, we'd want to expand the program as much as possible to make sure any kid who could benefit from it
Yes.
would have that benefit.
Pat?
So thank you very much
Sure.
for your presentation, and the program certainly sounds like it has promise. I just want to reflect for a moment and tie this back to the fact that the board has been focusing on the achievement gap as one of the goals that we have, and that we asked previously to try to look at research-based interventions, which would be very helpful in addressing the achievement gap. And I think we have had some presentations in the last few board meetings, including the presentation on the equity project at the high school, where they're trying to get underrepresented students to enroll in more AP classes, and this is also an example. So, you know, when we're asking these questions, we're really trying to get a sense of what is most effective to address these issues. And having been a teacher myself, I do understand the idea of your intuition and your feeling about it, but you know, I think we want to try to identify a way in which we could really clearly see that this is working. Now, I don't necessarily, you know, I have some experience in research. It doesn't necessarily have to be numbers. You don't always need a control group in education. It could be like you could also have some informal interviews and discussions with the kids, where you could actually write down some of their comments, and that could be very revealing about their attitudes towards school and their sense of self, you know, in their achievement. So I think that we need to be a little bit clearer on what we're going to be using to evaluate this program, as to whether we would suggest expanding it or changing it in some way. And it would need to be very clear which measure we're going to use and why we're going to use it, what we're looking for. And I would be happy to make suggestions if you're stuck. Okay, so I'd be happy to talk to the kids. I mean, I know how to run control groups, groups where you have kids talk, focus groups, and that sort of thing. So, but I think this is very key for us. We want to do something that really does make a difference, but we want to be able to articulate why we chose that program.
Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both you and with Paul. You know, just, you know, ideally, we want to see a minimum of 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. So we need to actually have controls. We know we have an achievement gap. We know that some students don't succeed as well as others, and I think this is a good start, but we have to be able to measure it, and you know, we've been talking about that for a long, long time, so that we can continue with programs or build on them. And I really appreciate what you both said.
Yeah, to add on to that, you know, it's occurred to me that there's a distinct possibility that this program could have positive effects long after the program is over. If it improves these kids' self-perception, confidence, their relationship to school, they might do better in school all the way through. And if we could follow them long enough to establish that, then that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, and we can even see, so they look like, most of them look like they were at grade level or above in reading at this point. So what we would, I mean, a very simple thing that you could see is, do they remain at grade level or above in math and reading into middle school, which is a very key time, right? So that would be a simple measure. Well, theoretically simple.
And my question comes out of knowing that the gap is stronger and more prevalent in mathematics.
Right.
And being a math teacher for a long time, it's something I really would like to see us attack from kindergarten on, or pre-K, actually. Because
Right.
we know it starts before second grade.
Right, and math is a gatekeeper for a lot of other things.
And if, the point of following it through to Algebra 1 and beyond. because
Exactly.
That's where it's like it all blows up.
Yeah, would this kind of tutoring get the majority of those young men through Algebra 1 by 8th or 9th grade, right?
So I would like to see this model also applied to students who have social skills issues. I think this is a great way to test the program, that many of the kids in our achievement gap also have social skills issues. And eventually, if this program gets established, I would like us to see us address those issues at the same time that we're addressing academic issues in English and math.
So, I think that's true. Some young people do have social skills issues, but the focus of this particular intervention is African American and Hispanic males. And they weren't chosen for
I know they weren't.
those particular issues. I asked specifically what the criteria were. So,
Sure.
I think social skills groups, which they do have at the elementary schools and so
Oh,
forth,
okay, if they do, fine.
are good. But this is an excellent focus because
Sure.
for intervention to really work, you want to be as focused as possible on the population and what their need is.
But my belief is that, the social skills and the, go hand in hand with the intellectual skills. I've been involved in peer counseling since 1971 with the outgoing superintendent, the Alameda County superintendent, actually, was on my first board. So in my belief and in my practice, kids who feel comfortable in school and interact well do better academically.
They sure do. That's been my experience too.
Yeah, so the point is well taken. And yet, we need to focus in, definitely.
So any comments from the public? Yes, come to the mic, please.
This sounds fabulous, and I was wondering, the
Could you
data...
introduce yourself?
Pardon me?
Introduce you, we need
Kathy
your name.
Evans, kindergarten
Great.
teacher at Cornell.
Great, thank you.
The data reflected the students, the younger students. I'm curious as to whether you see advances, improvements in the mentors also.
We didn't measure their growth as part of this program because they weren't receiving the tutoring services. Though I think, so it sounds like next year we need more data, but also something to compare it to.
Yeah.
And then also Ms. Lowe, what you were talking about, measuring those sort of immeasurables through, and also Mr. Black, what you were talking about, the social gains that they can get by being around those older kids through more surveys, more interactions, more conversations, and trying to inform you better that way.
And the mentors were selected because they were successful students. So they were good role models.
And I've seen studies that show that the tutors as well as the
Yes.
as the tutees.
Right.
I agree. There's actually a research base which shows that kids who are chosen as mentors or as role models, that it helps them in both their self-esteem and in their own achievement. So that I'm more willing to take at face value.
I also think if you look that all the mentors are interested in returning and all of the mentees are interested in returning, also it's not a hard piece of data, but it is indicative of the program is the kids like it.
Taking those young men to Albany Bowl was a good idea.
Any more comments from the public? Board? More comments?
That's it.
So thank you, Mr. Madlin, for
Thank you very
this
much.
excellent presentation. I think you have support for the program. It appears to be an evolving program. We have a lot of good suggestions for improving it, so thanks for a great start.
And we know that the tutors and the tutees are willing to return, so I hope that you're willing to continue as well.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next item is item 7, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. How many would people like to speak? Okay, good. So you may come to the microphone. It appears there aren't so many that we have, you're normally limited to about 3 minutes to speak, and
You're up, Jim.
the board is not really allowed to respond to your comments. We will listen.
Hi, I'm Jim Bradley, a now 4th grade teacher at Cornell Elementary. I was delighted when I went by school today to see that there was no new portable there. And I was wondering if what I suggested 2 weeks ago, someone finally listened to this and heard what we've been saying, which is Cornell needs some help with our staff. Because of the turnover there, we're concerned about what next year is going to look like. We understand the budget does not support this. What does support it, however, is not getting in a new portable, but going back to the old kindergarten configuration where we have an AM, PM. It means we don't need a portable, you don't have to pay to install it, you don't have to pay for the monthly rate on it, and you also get to take away one of the portables you're already renting. So I was just here tonight to remind you that this is what Cornell wants. Also to give you a little sort of frustration I had after the meeting 2 weeks ago, of feeling, who do I talk to about this? What are the proper channels to go through? I thought the meeting 2 weeks ago for public response to this was an appropriate forum, but I found out afterwards that actually the contract more or less had already been not signed, sealed, and delivered, but was on that way with getting the new portables. So somehow along the line, we missed our opportunity to really come to some sort of feedback to what we thought about this. Because I'll tell you, the staff is uniformly against this. I cannot speak for the parent community other than the parents who I've talked to, and they've all been uniformly against having a new portable as well. And they also seem to support, as they did 2 weeks ago, the idea of going back to an AM, PM kindergarten if that's what's needed to keep our playground, to also generate a little more income. And this is also, some of them agree with us on the fact they think it's developmentally more appropriate anyway to have a program like this. So I'm just here to find out, I know you can't speak to this, but I'm curious. The portable was supposed to arrive yesterday. It's not there, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed and saying someone's listening and maybe we can actually get something done with this. So thank you.
Thank you. I can give you a point of information. We can't, as you know, discuss it tonight, and maybe our acting superintendent has some information about the whereabouts of the portable. But I can tell you that I did just bring it up to the new superintendent to make sure she was aware of it, and she said she will be investigating it as soon as she comes to the district in July. I can't tell you what the investigation will result in, but she is aware of it and will be looking at it.
Okay. Well, I just hope that the money isn't being spent needlessly here.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Hi, Kim Denton, event chair for the American Cancer Society Relay for Life. I'm here tonight to thank you for once again sponsoring our event. We had a very successful event at Cougar Field. We actually exceeded our goal of $25,000, which is $6,000 more than we did last year. Plus, we doubled the amount of survivors that we had registered at the event, which is a very big plus. And I especially want to thank Don Albright for working with me on the logistics of the event. He was very helpful. And I'm here to present a certificate of appreciation to the Albany Unified School District for generously sponsoring our event and for helping bring us closer to a cure. Thank you.
So I hope you'll remember to pass on her compliments to Mr. Albright.
It's already in my board notes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Be happy to do that.
Hello, my name is Shaheen Naysari. I am a teacher in Albany Children's Center preschool side, and tonight I'm representing the staff of Albany Children's Center regarding the portables in Ocean View Cedars program before and after school and relocation of that program. The staff at Albany Children's Center is very concerned about the relocation of our Cedars before and after school program. We feel it will have a huge impact on our after-school program and therefore on the families who require our care for their children, which is a growing need every year. The proposed new portables are much smaller and consequently will not be able to save the same number of families. We all know how important it is for Albany families to have on-site childcare. Currently, Cedars has been able to provide childcare for over 100 families at Ocean View. Reducing our space would mean we would have to reduce the number of children we could enroll due to state licensing issues. The biggest concern the bigger concern for us is that we will have to reduce the number of children we can serve. The proposed portables are smaller, and therefore we may have to turn some families away. We have 37 TK families this year, and 67 returning families from the previous years. Therefore, we have to, these 67, we have guaranteed the childcare for them already. Our program is also mandated to provide breakfast and snack to children. The current portables have a kitchen area to accommodate this. The proposed portables do not. Also, Cedars program has, cooking projects are part of after-school programs, and it's a valuable part. Therefore, not having a kitchen area will eliminate that important component of our program also. The location of Cedars currently is better for our first graders who are required to walk alone from class to childcare. This is during a very congested playground due to all of the other families picking up children as well. Our staff is able to visually watch the kids leave their rooms and walk down to Cedars program. This will not be possible where the proposed portables are, as they are behind the building, and there is no visibility to the first grade classrooms, and that's a real concern. The current Cedars portables have also bathrooms located in each one. As we serve children as young as 4 years, then remember we have TKs now, and in a growing number of TKs. These young children require a bathroom within a close proximity to ensure that their needs are met, sometimes due to accidents. We also have to change children. This is easier to manage in a portable with a bathroom. The proposed portables do not have a bathroom. The young children would have to use the ones in the main hallway, around the building, and inside the school, which is really far from the proposed location for the portables. We all know how hard it can be for the children to hold it and walk to such a location when they have an urgent need. Currently, the Cedars staff is also alone with children on the school ground starting at 7:30. We start before school starts. Then we are always alone in the site without support that the school teachers have. Where we have Cedars now is a safer and more visible location. Perhaps the solution to this is to put older and more independent students into smaller portables without the amenities needed by a childcare. Ocean View had a 4th grade class just this year using one of the proposed portables.
Excuse me, you've exceeded your time by a minute. Could you maybe?
I am done. I am done.
If you could finish up in another 30 seconds.
Yes, we are thinking that the portables, the proposed portables can be used by older children, and Cedars can be reinstated in the place that already is in the same location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Carrie Dunnigan, ATA. Just kind of following up on the same issue, there's a lot of concern for what's happening to ACC, and it feels like almost a dismantling. They're losing classrooms, and we just want to say that a couple of the teachers did write to President Knight last week, and we appreciate him acknowledging that in solving this, it's going to take collaboration and creativity. However, he did say that TK and K is required to be on the same schedule. And I contacted Kathleen Halverson from the California Department of Education, and she sent back the law stating that the governing board of a school district shall maintain all of the elementary schools established by it for an equal length of time during the school year. This still felt a little vague, so we asked for further clarification. And according to Ms. Halverson, it said, pursuant to California Ed Code, the TK program must be of equal length, in other words, the same number of instructional minutes to any K program in the district. So one of the proposals from ACC was to look at an AM/PM model. I'm not saying this will work. However, in the spirit of collaboration and creativity, it would be wonderful to at least open up that discussion and see if it's possible. One of the other things that President Knight mentioned was the trend toward the longer K day. And on this issue, teachers hear the word trend and we think, oh, not again. Too often we allow trends to drive education policy instead of using sound educational research, based on experience. And in doing so, we waste an enormous amount of time. We've heard so much about that pendulum swinging back and forth. When you look at an issue like, the longer day for kindergarten, there are too many factors involved to just kind of throw that out there and automatically assume that that applies for all districts and all schools across the board. There are different reasons why people are looking at the popularity of a longer day. One of those is all of the districts across the nation that are terribly impoverished and children not having other opportunities. So it's safer to keep them in a school environment. We recognize that. We also look at the very real issue that it's daycare. For a lot of families, the longer school day is important because it's free daycare in a sense. 5-year-olds, really, there's only so much academic input that they can take and retain in a day. That's simple brain research. So we're simply suggesting that we could better accommodate both programs if we were indeed willing to be collaborative and creative. And I encourage the schools in the district to look at instructional minutes in order to see how we can save the valuable programs, especially at ACC. Dismantling their program would be just such a terrible shame and loss for Albany Unified School District. They do an absolutely amazing program. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Johnson, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Cornell School. And I've also been teaching in the district for about 25 years. But the past 9 years, I've been teaching kindergarten. And, Carrie was talking about the trends. And I've seen a kind of a disturbing trend that's happened in kindergarten. When I started teaching, there were 2 teachers, and we had about 20 students. And we even had some aid time. And then we had 2 teachers, and we lost the aid time. And then the superintendent decided to change that program, the model, and we had 1 teacher with 20, and now it's 23 or more. And I can really understand why the district is looking at a longer day. It looks like that would solve a lot of problems, particularly with Common Core. But I think one of our concerns as kindergarten teachers is that a longer day doesn't mean that it's a better experience. My concern is this: I have 23 children, I'm alone. And I don't think that the longer day doesn't deal with the issue that we see. And the issue we see is the ratio of teacher to children is too high. I wouldn't mind a longer day if I had more support, but I don't. Those children don't get enough of my time. I don't care if it's a longer day or what. And we have to also keep in mind that the kindergarten program, again, over the past 9 years, things have been taken away. And that is the 2 teachers working together, that support for those children. Also, we have to keep in mind that the program, this model that was implemented, was supposed to be a pilot. It was only at our urging did the superintendent agree to meet with us after a year. And Pat, you were talking about data. And after that year of having this 1 teacher, we did bring data from Cornell, and we presented it. And it was only after a year, but what we saw was that more children were being referred to the reading specialist. So we did try to collect data to see what this pilot program showed, and that's what we saw. We also had some safety concerns of only 1 teacher. And again, as I said, our classes are getting larger. And then we were told by the superintendent in the fall that we would get some aid support. That didn't happen. Not only did we not get aid support, but in the fall, we were also told by the superintendent that our kindergarten children were not going to get 30 minutes of PE, and we had to come and ask the board, talk to the board about reinstating that. So I'm just asking you to please reconsider the AM/PM model. It's not necessarily that we don't want the children longer, but considering the facilities issue, and I think the bigger issue with it, as teachers we see, is the kinds of connections. The more teacher-student connection we have, the better experience for our youngest children. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Warren. I'm the reading specialist at Cornell. A couple of weeks ago when we were here speaking about this, I'm not sure, we kind of made it clear that we're here for two reasons. One is we really want more office support because of our departing principal and our complete office staff who left because they were overwhelmed. We're going to be in a real crisis next year. And if we can move on this kindergarten reconfiguration, or going back to the way it was, and not use the portables, we really think that would be a great solution. So last time, I think one of you asked about what the objections in the past have been, and I think our outgoing superintendent had mentioned equity being an issue. And I'm not really sure, how we measure that equity. Every teacher is different anyway. Delivery of instruction is different. So I don't know if it's about a longer school day or having two teachers in a room, but I do know that when we spoke last time, teachers from other schools, even if they didn't want this model at their school, said, great, if this worked at Cornell, let's do it. And we don't really understand what that objection is or what kind of validity that objection has when it has worked so well at Cornell. Last time we didn't tell parents we were talking about that issue, and several parents came up and said they had had children in that kindergarten model, and then had children their younger children in the new model, and they said they were amazed at the difference in the classroom. Even the same teacher who was able to handle kids in the old model, and the classroom looked so different in the new model, and it increases the need for more aid time, and it created all kinds of issues this year, and a lot of special needs children that we don't even know about coming into kindergarten. So the other thing is I wanted to talk a little bit more about this need for office support. I was thinking over these past 2 weeks about how efficient our last two secretaries have been. I mean, I can't imagine anybody running an office the way that they did, and still they were overwhelmed. So I had been talking to many, many teachers in other districts. Again, to say that in Oakland and San Francisco, when a school goes over 500 students, there's usually an assistant principal assigned. We don't have that. When I talk to friends who are teachers and ask them, they have assistant principals and 2 full-time office staff. Maybe if it's even just this year, just in our transition year, it's just that I'm really worried about what's going to happen in the fall, since we have no continuity in our office at all. I'd also just wonder if it's possible to answer one question, and that is kind of what Jim said. What can we do now? I mean, are we going to go to Cornell and see portables there and that's our answer? Or is there anything else we can do? Because we know that work hasn't started. I know it's been approved, but it hasn't started on the portables. Can that question be answered? Or, I mean, what we can do to get this going this year?
Just to clarify the process, we cannot directly address an issue that is not on the agenda. We can listen, and we can certainly make reference to staff to tell them to respond. At this time, with the transition in leadership that is coming, the assumption would be that when we direct the staff, that the Cornell staff has concerns, she would be conveying it then to the superintendent, who has not yet started.
Right, and I understand that it will be put on the agenda in August, but I know I emailed you, Marcia, and asked, is that too late, though? I mean, can we come in August and those portables will be built? I mean, I think that's the issue. We're on kind of a time crunch here.
The new superintendent starts next week,
She
correct?
starts July 1st.
Starts Tuesday, not soon.
Okay, so we can contact her directly and say, okay, thank you.
Any more members of the public who wish to speak on items not on the agenda? Okay, we'll return to the agenda. Our next item is item 8A. And this is a second reading of the budget. This is for a review and action item. We have a staff report.
Thank you, Vice President Maris, members of the board. My name is Alan Gard, the Chief Business Official for the Albany Unified School District. The budget incorporated in the packet tonight is the same budget that was presented on June 10th. There have been some developments since the June 10th presentation. For instance, the state has actually approved and adopted their own budget, which was the earliest in the past 3 decades.
By far.
By far. There have been some developments as far as some changes. However, there aren't any specifics as how that would impact Albany directly. But from what I was able to see as far as statewide, the budget that was presented on June 10th isn't going to dramatically change from what's incorporated when new details are released. Some of the things that I want to just remind the board is that the budget is we're able to have a positive certification, which means we are able to meet all of our financial obligations for 2014-15 through the 2 subsequent years, which is through 2016-17. The issue would be after 2016-17 that there is a big concern because of unanticipated expenditures, and with the restoration of Measure I kind of in flux until November, there may be some items that, or the budget would need to be looked at again during the year in November to see, or the budget would still need to be looked at in once we know if the restoration of Measure I passes or not. But as it stands right now, the budget is balanced, and staff recommends approval of the budget.
I have one question. It's about Fund 17.
Yes.
Fund 17, currently the money in there is earmarked for career technical ed.
Correct.
But Fund 17 itself is part of the general fund and can be used as a contingency fund for whatever the district decides to use it for.
Correct.
Okay, that was the only question.
So I did watch, since I wasn't here for your presentation, I did watch the videos, and it was very thorough, and I really appreciated it. And I also appreciated the questions that came from the board. They were pretty concise. So you'd see no significant. The numbers haven't changed since the state passed the budget.
Correct. It hasn't changed significantly.
And from what I heard you say, restoration of Measure I will help us, but 3 or 4 years out, we'll still be flowing negative.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was clear.
We'd still be, even with the restoration of Measure I, we would still be deficit spending next year.
So it still is necessary for the board to have the discussion about spending priorities?
Yes.
Spending priorities.
And,
Priorities. Yeah.
and Member Black, you mentioned that at the last board meeting, and I have conveyed that to Superintendent Williams.
I'm sure she's watching the board meetings anyway, but.
I know she is.
Well, she's at the Dublin board meeting tonight.
Her last one.
Yes, her last one.
Pat?
Yeah.
So I asked Mr. Gard a question which I think is probably worth talking about in the public setting. I won't ask every question, but this is the one about the news about the reserve limit in the trailer bill of the budget and the possible effect it might have. So I asked, because it's very new news and, I'm just trying to grasp it myself, so it's good for everyone else to have that. When would this reserve limit take effect? And how, if at all, would it affect our budget in the coming school year?
Okay. Thank you for that question. This is a big concern. The concern that's being addressed is in the budget that was approved and adopted by the state, there's this trailer bill that requires a maximum reserve for school districts, and the maximum reserve for a district our size would be 6%. And that's a concern because, as the language states, we would have to explain if we are over that 6% maximum reserve, why we are over that 6% maximum reserve.
So, Mr. Gard,
Yes.
so first, when and if would it take effect? That's the first question. So why don't you answer that? Okay.
Sure. So it would take effect in November if the voters throughout the state approve a constitutional amendment change incorporating this this language.
Okay, good. Then secondly, if let's assume the scenario that this rainy day reserve passes.
Yes.
All right, that it passes in the state. So how, if at all, would then that reserve limit affect our budget for this coming school year?
It would require us to have fluctuations in our spending year over year. For instance, in the budget that was presented on June 10th, we barely meet the minimum 3% reserve in 2016-17. However, with this new legislation, if it takes effect, we would be required to spend a lot of money in 2014-15 and then make dramatic cuts in 2015-16 and make even more cuts in 2016-17 just to stay within their requirement.
Okay, so I'm going to clarify for myself, I'm just going to reiterate. So if the scenario is that this legislation for the rainy day reserve passes, then next year, 2014-15, we would have to adjust our budget to spend down the reserve.
Yes.
Unless we were able, there are elements which would allow us to keep a greater reserve if we...
Yes, if we hold a public hearing and explain why we need to keep the reserve, and then the County Office of Education would then review and let us know if it's okay or not. So they would have to approve us reserving more than 6%.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. I'm sure we'll be discussing this more in the future.
And could one of the rationales be that we go broke earlier?
Yes, and all the school districts and many agencies have been explaining that to the state, and their response is that they've heard our concerns, but it's still incorporated in their budget.
Jeez.
Any more comments? I have a couple.
Thanks for that question, Patrick.
So it seems to me if we show them a structural deficit as well, that could be a good argument for letting us have maybe 8% one year when it's going to get below 6% the next year. Is that?
It could be, however, because this is so new and there hasn't been a lot of clarification from the state, It's hard to really say what we can or can't do. So this is just strictly from the language that's in the trailer bill.
And then just for the public's information, I'd like to clarify or indicate a couple of things which the budget shows. Just want to highlight them. One is that, I guess a question, how much of the budget deficit coming will be due to the increased burden for school districts to solve the benefits and pension
Yes.
problems with the state funds.
And this was an unforeseen expense that the state put on school districts. It's over the next 3 years, it will be $1.2 million that is that we would have to pay out that isn't able to be used for other program needs. So the $1.2 million over a 3-year period is basically diverted, and so that's why there's this spending concern that we have to look at.
And a follow-on comment, you're already indicating, I think, what those impacts are, because we're seeing some future reductions in expenditures for classified staff and books and services.
No, the change in staff from 2013-14 to 2014-15 was mostly because of aides that were approved for 2013-14 that wasn't for that wasn't going forward.
And that explains why the staff, the certificated staff numbers are going up. Because we're hiring new teachers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for taking on this responsibility.
Thank you.
It's very troubling. I appreciate your
We'll be
efforts.
depending on you to explain the new ramifications to us.
I think what this
Thank you.
points up is, too, that it's really important to pass Measure I in November, or we're in much deeper trouble. I mean, you've shown what happens to our reserves if that doesn't pass.
So I think we need
Ron.
to actually vote on accepting the budget and passing.
Yeah, do I have a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item is item 8B, approval of the local control accountability plan. Could we have staff speak to that?
Yes, good evening. I'm Peter Parenti, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Albany Unified, and I present to you tonight the final draft of the Local Control Accountability Plan. In previous board meetings, I've presented first drafts and second drafts with presentations on its structure. Tonight, I bring to you a final draft that has as many details fleshed out as possible. And so I leave you with the remaining time to ask questions, clarifying your understanding.
Board, questions? Yes, Paul.
Okay, I sent a copy of this, Jackie. I think you should have it. I want this in the minutes. I think it's a great plan. I definitely going to vote to approve it. But there's one aspect I mentioned last time, and I just want to be sure that this comment is in the minutes. And I'll just read what I have here so that Jackie will have the exact wording. The reason our schools are in program improvement right now is because the government picked an arbitrary number for improvement of test scores year to year without any basis other than it sounded good. We are setting ourselves up for failure by picking an arbitrary number for improvement in many places in this plan. The important thing is to make changes that we think will lead to improvements and measure the change. Then if we don't improve, we should adjust the strategy appropriately. Instead, we'll be reacting to and trying to explain why we had an improvement of 7% instead of 10%, which misses the point entirely. The point is to improve each year, not to improve by a specific set amount. That's the statement, just to expand on it a little bit. I understand we have to have metrics, but I don't think we have to have an absolute number that's our target. I think we can say we will set our baseline this year, and next year we will measure ourselves against that baseline and look for improvement. As long as we're continually improving, I think we're okay. But if we aim at 10%, we've all gotten chain mail It says, you know, if 1/3 of people respond to this letter, you'll get 200 letters in the mail next week, and none of us have ever gotten 200 letters in the mail. Those numbers are arbitrary and they never work out. So that's my comment.
Pat?
I understand Paul's point completely. I think that Director Parenti is probably a little bit up against between a rock and a hard place, because you are probably directed to have specific metrics in specific ways in order for the LCAP to be acceptable. Is that correct?
That is correct. 2 weeks ago, when I presented to you their most recent draft, it was only days before that, on the 30th of May, when the county office had reviewed a previous draft and said, your metrics don't have enough statistical numbers for us to pass Section 2. So they were concerned that we were stating that we would improve conditions without naming a percentage by which they would be improved. And so we are a bit in a quandary, because at the same time, the state and the federal government has removed some of their most robust, although controversial, student achievement measures. So in the very year that we have to write a new plan with very precise metrics, we don't have STAR testing results, nor do we have the Smarter Balanced assessments with results coming anytime soon.
Yeah,
Bit of a precarious place.
Let me finish. So given my understanding of that, I just want to confirm that I agree with Paul's philosophical point, that I understand that you must state things in a specific way for it to be acceptable to the county, but that his point for the creation of programs and for improvements for our students is what I will be looking for. And I don't see that as a contradiction.
Does anybody remember, I can't remember the name of the posthumous Dr. Seuss book about the schools, and, you know, there's the one where they were so creative and they were being forced into the model that was block and step. Do you
I don't remember,
Oh.
but I know the story, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. Director Parenti's been put into that same box. He's been told that, you know, we have to have a plan that's not creative, as creative as I think Albany schools are. And, you know, again, you have to show so much improvement on a test, you know, which was the disaster we called No Teacher Left Behind, No Student Left Behind, No Child Left Behind. So, I mean, I agree 100% with what Paul had to say, and, you know, it's a shame that, you know, we have to answer to the county has to answer to the state, and the state has to answer to the feds in order to get the monies, the meager monies that aren't going to be increased when we thought they would be, to do what we're supposed to do. But I believe that no matter what the measure is that's in the document, that Albany does a great job, because we teach kids how to think. And we have great teachers who do that.
Yeah.
And you can't, and, you know, I'm involved in training teachers, and, you know, my motto is every teacher does it differently. You create the magic the way that you do, and the way that Jim creates magic in his classroom is going to be different than the way I would or anyone else.
I would agree with that completely. I'd like to say that there seems to have been a breakdown with our legislators, however, in their math education, because they don't seem to understand statistics at all. And, you know, you point out that if every subgroup has to improve by 10%, that will increase the achievement gap. So I'm sure that's not what they intended, but that is in fact what would happen. So I just want to be careful on how we word this and what we say and what we promise, because we don't know how we're going to be held accountable next year and told we're failing because we didn't meet a completely arbitrary goal.
Other comments? Well, I'm going to make my comments and then I'll go to the public. Does anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Okay. First of all, I want to thank Peter for his hard work in producing a document, which to me is and should be an evolving document. It's a good start, and I think putting 10% in there helps people to recognize that we do have to have some measure. Some of the things I'm concerned about addressing in this evolving process are that we look at what happens after our teachers on special assignment, that we do some planning, making sure that the professional learning committees or groups are ready to take over from the teachers on special assignment to address the core curriculum issues. We've done math and English, or at least have a start on that, but we still have social studies and science to come. Also, the methods to assess and address the needs of students in the academic achievement gap. I think we've already indicated some of the issues there. A little bit of my concern is this: the gap is somewhat a natural demographic phenomenon, that there are some students, some people in our normal demographic who just are not academically inclined. Some are. And that we need to address the needs of those kids as well, who are not so academically inclined, but are going to be valuable, contributing citizens to our community. So I would also like to see a little more description of the refinements to the career technology programs, a description of ways to improve. Also, this is somewhat a different issue, but I think we need to look at the descriptions of ways to improve stakeholder involvement in the LCAP, in the local control assessment plan or program, and involve students, families, and staff as much as we can. We've seen some of the stakeholder minutes which indicate primarily staff has been involved, and we're not seeing a lot of parent groups. We have the PTA, we have the instructional improvement groups, the site councils. Those are very active parents in some of our sites. And I would like to see more comments coming from them. And I would like to see more solutions coming too. We presented a lot of the issues, but I think we need solutions to those issues. And further descriptions of the causes and remedies for suspensions and expulsions. I think we're doing a pretty good we're leading to this restorative justice concept. I think that's very healthy. I think the students who make mistakes, we need to address those as mistakes and try to restore them as into our academic or into our school programs, not just expel them. There are some cases where it's appropriate, but we need to be really careful about doing that. So thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the local accountability plan.
I'll second.
Is everyone in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. A lot of work.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was. It is a lot of work. And it leaves you vulnerable to all kinds of criticism, so it's part of your job.
That's the first time you've done it. So
You've done it, that's right.
That's the headache of it.
Yeah, it's very impressive that you got this done in time.
If I could please close with a comment of hope. This was a joy to work on as well as it was a lot of hard work. And for the first time, a variety of student outcomes other than standardized testing could be a component of a district plan. And so it was wonderful to hear that people wanted us to articulate music instruction, athletics programs, clerical staffing, teacher staffing, teacher professional development. No other federal or state plan has yet asked us those questions, and therefore lots of stakeholders feel separated or sidelined when we have to write school-wide or district-wide plans. So in this first time, I was able to learn a lot more about the district very quickly and get to meet a lot of the staff members. It was also a wonderful experience.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, our next item, the next two items actually kind of fall on nicely from the LCAP. So we're conducting the second reading on the Speak Up, Be Safe curriculum, items 8C.
Yes, I brought this to the board last meeting for a first read. Curriculum's been on display for over a month in the district office. I have it in the back of the room along with a summary. And as I mentioned, I went out to all 4 of the school sites and met with teachers and listen to concerns and thoughts and ideas. Primarily, this curriculum was selected because it was teacher-friendly, and it's relatively inexpensive, and each site will be charged with implementing it the way they want. There's no one set way to implement it, so it'll be up to each site to determine how they're going to implement it.
Board comments? Anyone in the public wish to speak on the issue of safe curriculum? We have some teachers here. You're going to be involved in presenting the curriculum. So if we're all happy with it, do I have a motion? Or do we have further comment from the board?
Move that we accept and adopt the proposed child abuse prevention curriculum. Speak up and be safe.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next item. The single school plans for structural improvement, item 8D. Do we have staff?
I wanted to make a comment before
Yes.
Peter did. I know that the board has expressed, and this is not the first year, about the volume of the reading that goes into the SIPSAs, the Single Plans for Student Achievement, and also wanting to spend more time with it. Although we have a requirement that it has to be approved by July 1st in order for us to start spending those federal dollars, because these are tied to federal dollars. One suggestion might be to schedule in the future a work study meeting for the board where the principals we could spend some quality time reviewing the SIPSAs, and you would have them far enough in advance where you could take a look at those with more time rather than cramming them into a meeting like this where I think you had about 500 pages to read.
That might be a good idea. I do notice that in the past, we have had all the principals present when we've read the plans, and they're not here tonight, so.
Correct.
So is there a requirement to prove this by a certain date? Is that what you said? Yeah.
In order for the district to start spending federal categorical program funds, it must be approved by July 1st.
July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or if it's not, we can't spend those monies until such time as they're approved.
I think that is a good suggestion for the future because really, that is forcing us to practically rubber stamp these, and that is not something that I approve of. So I think it is a good suggestion. I have a few comments about.
Good.
Yeah, I have a general comment. If there's a follow-on to
So
what
who would
Dr.
like
Brown
to go
said.
first?
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, and I might come back later with specific, but the general comment is that in addition to having more time to read them, comment on them, we have never had actual follow-up. Every one of these plans has goals for the year, and we have never come back the next year and said, did we meet those goals? I know it's extra work for the sites and it's extra work for the board, but I'd love to at least look at some way that we could have some follow-up to find out if the sites met the goals, if not, why, and what the board could do to help them meet the goals in the future. Because it's all about helping the students. It's not punitive. We certainly don't want to punish a school because they didn't meet the goals. We want to find out why they couldn't and what we can do to help. So just a suggestion, something that we can consider over the course of the year, how we're going to address that.
Pat?
I had a number of questions, which I had hoped to ask each principal, so I can't do that. So instead, for the purposes of this, I will just reflect on two elements which I saw as themes running through the plans. The first is that I noticed when the elementary school principals were asked to describe barriers and limitations, they almost uniformly said that there was inconsistent Common Core state standards curriculum implementation and staff development. And so I had hoped they would be here so that they could explain what their concerns were and what they hoped to be improved. So in this case, I will just hope that in the next year, I am going to hear from them whether they are getting what they need to begin the implementation of Common Core, and whether they have suggestions for improvement. So that's one comment.
Member Lowe, I think Mr. Parenti can answer that question.
Okay, great.
Yep, I'll be right. So if I could step back, I'm going to answer your question. And yet I also want to frame a few things that have made us find this all very challenging. In our shifts from the federal accountability and the removal of the STAR exam, I want to remind the public and our staff and ourselves that we've been in an enormous sea change that didn't start until October, November of this very school year. So all of the school plans were set in place, and in order to spend federal dollars, those plans had to be linked towards achievement on the STAR exam. And all the principals began their school years with that in mind. And then the STAR exams were removed sometime in November.
That's right.
Expectation was to move to the Smarter Balanced Assessments as a pilot field test without obtaining results. And so in a matter of a couple school site council meetings on every campus, those goals had to be removed, and therefore a vacuum was created. How do we now measure across all three schools in a fair or an equitable manner? How do we measure across the high school and the middle school without those major components in place? And that is one of the most broad answers to your question, Board Member Lowe, that CCSS implementation, when we began in the summer of 2013, we began with very large-scale workshops, and some are hourly to understand the standards. But our teachers, and I'm hoping some of them would have been here, our teachers were conducting those workshops and planning for their curriculum and instruction with the goal in mind that their students were still going to have to take the STAR exam. And so we were saying, here are the California standards for teaching, or here are the California standards for mathematics, here are the Common Core standards for mathematics. Your kids are going to take a STAR exam in May on these old standards, but we'd like you to shift to these new ones. And they were doing a lot of grappling with bridging the work. Do I remove this unit because it's not in Common Core? Do I leave it in because my students are going to have to answer questions on the state tests? And that's part of the broad implementation problem that we faced, is then all of that work kind of almost let open the floodgates, and we thought, gosh, we'd already put in 10 weeks, 14 weeks of instruction in math and English before we knew that those tests wouldn't be in place. Since then, I gave the principals an additional month to work with their school site councils, and so they were due to me on the 30th, and I went through every one of the school plans, and I asked the principals, what do you mean by a Common Core state standards implementation and a inconsistent implementation and professional development? And that was one of the themes that they had answered on, was that shift in the middle of the year.
So that does help, with the clarification and the reminder. And I do remember as well that we had, I always call her Ms. Avery. It's Liz Remiller now. That's right, Remiller. Yeah, now. Came to represent some of the teachers and talked about some of the adoptions that were going on and the increasing familiarity with Common Core and so forth. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from the teachers about the shift that's happening and if they feel that they have the support that they need. Liz spoke about actually a real interest in from the teachers and a happiness about moving away from the bubble tests into this. So, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, so I can wait on that. And then my second sort of overall theme, actually this was from the Cornell, Wendy Holmes has always been so detail-oriented, so data-based. Her reports are just magnificent. And she mentioned here about the lack of evaluation tools for monitoring program effectiveness, which pretty much gets at exactly what Paul was saying. And, it sort of ties in with all these themes, like we don't have enough clerical staff, we don't have enough staff, so how are we going to get the data or enter the data or do the things that we need to really know what we want to know? So I think this is a bigger question for the board and for the staff as we prioritize and reprioritize and try to figure out what we're going to reinstate, what we can afford. We've been saying this for 3 years. We want clearer data. Everybody wants to know how we're progressing on things. We want to know how we're doing, but we don't have it. And so I think we have to make some decisions about how we're going to, and, you know, personally, for example, I just think somebody in the central office, it doesn't have to be hired a new person necessarily, but within the positions that are there, somebody has to really know how to use data and how to help other people use data. And that's fundamental. I'm not saying we need to hire a new person, because that can be part of a position that exists, but the person has to have that expertise and be able to coach other people. So that's one thing I see.
Ron?
And I think that's a great idea to bring up with our new superintendent now. You know, from listening to you, Pat, and listening to Paul, it seems to me that it would make sense to schedule a report halfway through next school year on reviewing what folks said they want to do and reviewing what the barriers are to getting things done. Like, are they getting what they need? I heard you say that, and that's really important. So I would suggest that, you know, next January or sometime that we get a report with the principals here, so that we can ask them, did you get what you need? How are you doing on goal X, Y, and Z?
I mean, that's a great way to frame it. For example, the high school is talking about trying to use Aries analytics. We need to know what is hard for the teachers and for the staff in using that. You know, what do they need? Or is that not the tool that's going to work for them and us?
That's a really good specific question.
I like your idea.
And that people are asking that all across the state, actually.
Any other board comments?
Actually, I'd like to suggest, Jackie, did you capture that for the minutes? Good.
Someone at the district office needs to have the expertise around the data,
Right,
and also the need for a mid-year report.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So I have a couple,
a
anyone
good
in the
board.
public wish to
enjoying you
speak on
guys.
this issue? Yeah, we have 2 people. 3, good.
Hi, Jim Brantley again from Cornell. I'm also a member of the Site Council, and so your question about your review of progress, the Site Councils do that. It's one of the things we do at the beginning of the year is to go over the data we have. In the past, it was all driven by STAR. What we're going to do next year, I don't know. The one thing we do have, I think that's common over the years, is our own district-created math assessments. That's only looking at math. We could use that. It doesn't come in a convenient disaggregated bundle the way that STAR results do. So it's going to require some more work to get this data presentable to then look at for a site council. Getting back to the old problem, labor issues and having people to do this. I didn't know if you had any other questions about what goes on with having been involved with the site council for the last 3 years and having been on site council before. Those plans all go to staff. We look at this. We come to agreements as to what we think reasonable growth would be, what we want to report, and then also what should go into to make the school look like it's sort of in step with everyone else. The other thing, a completely separate issue, is the whole thing of what we're doing with Common Core and what that looks like. I would like to assure the board that Albany is in some ways, I think, less impacted by Common Core because your teachers are already doing Common Core-like things in the rooms. The districts that are, okay.
That's the magic part.
Yeah. As I look at this and I think, well, my big question is really, what are the assessments, Common Core assessments, going to look like? How are they going to differ from what we've been doing before so that kids could get used to being assessed in this way?
Would you mind if I ask you a question? At the elementary schools, were you delivering like grade level writing prompts at one of the grades? Like everyone wrote, you know, in response, like in 4th grade or something like that, in response to a prompt? Or?
There are grade level, yes, there are district created writing assessments.
Right, so those exist as well, right?
Those do exist. I don't know that every classroom does these.
Right. but some,
Yeah.
but a majority. But then the interesting thing about that, and I won't go off topic too long, is, Common Core is going to be much more about reading nonfiction and using evidence, and I know that the prompts may not have been as much like that because that's a new focus, even with third, fourth graders, right?
Yes.
Is starting to do that, so.
The prompts have been, traditionally, have been a personal narrative.
A narrative, exactly, so.
And we worked for several years in trying to come up with a rubric that would be common so that we could, any student at any classroom would be assessed the same way on this. And I don't know that we felt really satisfied we'd ever gotten to that final point. I can remember going to workshops where I would read on other classes from a different site, a blind reading of something, and then we would rate them as where is this on our 1 through 4 rubric. And we were sort of in that process, and suddenly, I don't know what shifted it, but weren't doing that any longer. And we never really came to any conclusion about how to do this. And it's, again, something that the nature of being in the education business, you jump into something, and just as you start to get used to it, suddenly you're thrown into a different pool. Go do this for a while. And that frustration is there, but I don't think it ultimately really affects who we are in our classrooms or the experience the children are getting.
Wow, thank you.
I can assure you that that's not unique to education.
That's good to hear.
Right.
Jim, a thought and maybe a question. Each one of us adopts a school each year, and we sit in a lot of site council meetings, and appreciate them. And I've been sitting in with you and Cornell as many as I could attend this year. We always get, I suggested we get reports, including the site principals, but is there possibly a way to include at least representatives from the site councils on those, reporting in halfway as well?
Right, it was a good thought, since you mentioned that that's something the site council is doing anyway. You could report to the board on what your findings are.
And I think that's what the principal does. I don't think the principal is speaking for herself here. I think she really does reflect this, what comes out of site council. And unless there's something you think that's...
Well, I just want the board to be confident that every single principal is reporting.
I could assure
read between the lines.
if we did not trust what our principals were doing, you would hear about it.
That's what I think. Yeah, and we're glad to know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just...
Next speaker? Go ahead.
Well, just what Jim already said, it is in the Cornell site plan on page 17 of our... It says, CCS aligned curriculum. We will identify what we already teach that aligns with CCSS and adjust our instruction to meet the new standards. I flagged that in there. I was very glad to see it, and something that I think all the schools will be doing, but Cornell called it out.
My name is...
Alan, I think Peter had a comment before we...
Peter?
I just wanted to follow up on a few comments from board members and our teacher, Jim Brandley. We are, of course, always struggling with the internal resources we have to manage data, especially collecting, housing, and reflecting on assessment, student achievement assessment data. Again, a glimmer of hope comes soon when Smarter Balanced is going to publish our access to online, what are called optional interim assessments that'll help us gear towards the final assessment this coming May 2015. They're optional for our district, but the data house, the warehouse management of data is taken care of. The disaggregation of data is taken care of. The prompts do not hold any state or federal accountability, but we can get immediate results. They're promising a very quick turnaround, so we don't have to grade these assessments ourselves. And compared to most districts, we're in a very healthy state with access to technology, so that if the staff, and when we have these conversations very soon, if the staff and the district can agree on scheduling, we'll be able to get some pretty relevant, immediate data on interim levels before we take that shot on May 2015.
Oh, that's a good point.
So between May, the last 12 weeks of school, we will take the Smarter Balanced assessments as a summative assessment, and we will have scores reported to us, and we will likely be held accountable to put those scores into our district and our school site plans. We haven't heard from the federal government yet that that'll be the the case. They haven't reauthorized ESEA, but we anticipate that they're going to expect us to use those as our first baselines. And I assume for some of us it would be nice to know ahead of time how close our kids are getting to success on those exams.
Thank you.
So,
I'm Edie Johnson. I'm a kindergarten teacher at
Could you
Cornell
get
School.
closer to the microphone? I'm having trouble
Just
hearing you.
pull it up a little higher.
Okay, is this better?
Much better.
My name is Edie Johnson. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Cornell School. I did attend those workshops last summer, and they were very, very valuable to me, and I am here tonight. And so I'm looking forward to the next set, which is coming up in August this year, and I will be there. From the kindergarten and a little bit first and second grade where we do not have smarter balance tests or standardized tests, we have a little bit more of a challenge of looking at data from what we get. We do have our Albany district assessments that we give our kids, and we lately, the last couple of years, have been actually entering them into a sheet that Peter has been sending to us. And so it would be nice if we could get some information back from those. I've never seen any back. So that's my sort of my one saying of what I would like to see from it. And now my other comment, I would like to say that I agree a lot with what Jim said. I hear this, and it is of concern of this year has been so back and forth with everything, and that I think in the next couple years it will straighten out. And we do look at the site plan as a staff as well, and look at what we said we were going to do and what we are actually doing. And then this year, just because of the way things have been, we haven't had a chance yet, but in the fall, I hope we will have a chance to look and see what we actually did this last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I think that, we all understand that this is a transition period and that we won't immediately, although the interim assessment data, may be useful, that we won't immediately have something. But I do appreciate, your willingness to learn, and to also the point that you made, which I think all of us are aware of, that Albany teachers teach in that higher order critical thinking and have always done that, to an extent anyway. So, but I just want to recognize that I understand that this is a time of transition and that we need to be supportive and recognize that.
Hi, Carrie Dunnigan, ATA in Marin. I just wanted to say thank you. Pat, last year in September, you had spoken with the district and everybody about really getting teacher input on Common Core and the implementation, and we appreciated your making that statement and request because it allowed us to have some discussion. It took a lot of pushing to get there, but I think having had the board request that was very helpful. The one thing I just want to say is as we go into the new year and we're going to be starting anew, and to be really clear that when we're looking at input, really following through on where that input is coming. I think for teachers, it sometimes got very frustrating because we really like our TSAs and we respect our TSAs, but they were given very few opportunities to come back and get our input, the site input on how we felt about things were working. And when major decisions are being made about where we're going based on teacher input, when the only input is really the 3 or 4 or 5 TSAs, I think it's hard for the rest of the site because there's a lot more going on, there's a lot more opinions. And so I guess what I'm asking, because I really feel like you guys are trying to open the communication, is as we go into this new year, just recognizing that the input of 3 or 4 people, if they have not been asked to go back to their sites and check in on certain issues, that's not really teacher input. And we would like to increase the teacher input. And thank you.
Good. Thanks. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Belinda Lesser, and I'm a math specialist and a credentialed teacher. I do a little bit of work for Albany Unified, and I work privately with kids who, special ed kids or kids who are disadvantaged. And I just want to make a couple comments about this, the single plan. This is the first time I've seen it. I wanted to point out that there continues to be difficulties for parents, students, and the middle and high schools in communication. And a lot of the students that I'm working with, part of the problem is that the parents can't figure out how to communicate with the school or how to find out how their kids are doing. ARIES is not up to date, and it certainly doesn't have homework listed. There's talk in here about syllabi and homework and assessments, and it is not available for parents, particularly for the kids who are struggling, challenged, falling behind. And there's a lot of talk about the gaps. I'm seeing drops in mathematics for SPED learners, English learners, economically disadvantaged learners who I work with, and we need to put in some stronger supports for these kids. We need to close these gaps in the communication. So there are a lot of amazing things about Albany, and that's why I take the time to come to these meetings and to keep talking to different people in the district, because this is such an amazing district with so many incredible teachers and resources. So there's a few kids that need some extra supports. So I just want to make sure that a lot of these things are addressed. It's talking about one of the issues in the high school says to apply intervention strategies. What are those strategies? Who's applying them? How are they being communicated? Because there's a lot of, I guess, words used, but there's not actually real actions that are always behind them for particular students who need that. So I just want to make sure that you keep that in mind. Also, I'm on the California Math Council, which is part of NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, in association with the Bay Area Math Project at Lawrence Hall of Science. And for the past 2 years, they have had free information sessions about the Common Core standards, the assessments with access to workshops, and I have forwarded these to principals I'm working with, and I wanted to make sure that this gets out to teachers and all the principals. If you can let me know who is the right person to contact. Was able to send one to Peter Parenti about, they had a panel of all the different math curricula that was available K through 12 that was aligned with the Common Core, with all the publishers there, so that teachers and people could ask different questions and find out what they were about. And they've had a hard time publishing these, so they just came out about a month or two ago. So that's another problem for Cornell this past year. There was almost no materials that were actually aligned to the Common Core. So now they're out, and these resources are available, and I'm not sure how to let you guys know.
I think Peter's the right person to get it. Yeah?
Okay, so I'll keep in contact with you and make sure that that gets out. And I think you've heard about some of the things, but
So we just, to respond to the curriculum, our elementary staff worked really hard all this year to review curriculum that they implemented in their classrooms on a pilot basis, and grappled with a lot of the issues related to how to align these to the new Common Core state standards and assessments. And we just recently adopted a new program for kindergarten through 5th grade in mathematics.
Right.
And it is our goal in this coming year to adopt new programs for 6th grade through 12th grade.
okay.
And our teachers last year and this coming summer are actually attending the National Conference for Teachers of Mathematics last year in Vegas, and this coming next week in San Diego.
Oh, the regional conferences.
That's
Great.
right.
Yeah, I go to the national one.
Right.
Okay, good.
And oftentimes those regional conferences will piggyback or reiterate what are happening locally and vice versa. So the teachers are very careful to choose and advocate for what they would prefer to attend. But they're interested in all of those.
Oh, I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that. And then also maybe there's some parents and other teachers who are not on the committees who would like to be apprised of some of these, say, free sessions that are local, so they can understand what's going on. A lot of parents I talk to are still very confused about the new curriculum, as many people are. So,
And I'd just like to say that, you know, I appreciate the concerns that you mentioned, and just, I want to assure you that those are, you named just about every major goal of this board. So that's, we don't take that lightly.
oh, good, and I want to be of assistance. That's why I'm always trying to do something about it. So I'm here to assist you.
Excuse me, could I get clarification? Are some of those presentations on the Common Core especially, is the audience specifically parents or general community members?
Some of them are for parents. They mostly say for educators.
Okay.
They just had a couple about assessments and Smarter Balanced. The representative from Smarter Balanced was there to explain how the assessments take place and give out sample assessment questions. That happened in April. And parents can attend, but there are also some other ones that happen, I think, at the middle school that are more geared towards parents.
Well, Peter and I were, Peter gave the one, and I attended the one at the middle school, which is why I asked, because there is a very large contingent of families in Albany who are very interested in the particular changes, and I think presentations geared at them to help them understand the changes, particularly in math, I think would be popular.
Yeah, that's my specialty. So I think people know how to get in touch with me here.
That's what I'm
So
saying at Ocean View. A lot of parents were interested in the presentation that Peter made on the core curriculum.
So I'll talk to the California Math Council, the Berea Math Project, and then I gave a quick presentation at the Cornell PTA about a little bit about Common Core and math strategies for the summer for families.
And did you, was there good response? Was there good attendance?
It was at the PTA, and so, I don't know, Jim, it was just regular attendance, right? But I had about 20 people email me for the PowerPoint to get the resources.
Did you put it out on the school e-trees?
I left it up to the schools to. It was in the school. It was in Cornell's newspaper.
Okay, well, it should
And
go
then-
out to all of them.
Yeah, and the principal at the middle school asked for a copy of it as well.
Well, it's very nice of you to donate your time to let families know. Families in Albany are very interested in it.
Okay, and I will talk to the California Math Council about us working on developing more presentations for parents as well as educators. So thank you for the feedback.
Thanks. And Marcia, can we be sure that all the school e-trees get that information? Thanks.
I think, so if I send something to Peter, that will get out to the appropriate people. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So any other comments from the public? Comments from the board? I have some closing comments. I looked at least 3 school sites, and just a general observation, the middle school had some results from the math tests. They showed results in a bar graph for, I think, the previous assessment process, and then they showed some rings with colors that showed a significant difference, I think, in the achievements, and that's all about the transition, I think, that we're talking about.
That's right.
I expect to see those numbers improve as the students get used to the new core curriculum, smarter balanced assessments. I was particularly pleased to see that those assessments in the colored ring scores listed specific problems, and they were graded on how they understood the problem, how they solved the problem in a bunch of different ways. They were assessed. So I got a pretty good sense of what this new Smarter Balanced Assessment is going to be. Looks pretty good.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I do have one question. I don't recall seeing a site plan for McGregor. Are we not required to have one this year?
Due to the transition for McGregor, I wrote Director Parenti and asked to not submit one. I started it, but because there were only 20 students basically served at McGregor, the kind of data that McGregor can collect and report on is challenging at best and identifiable to individual students if we're not careful.
Thanks.
Will that create a problem with the state?
I don't think so. There's no categorical funds spent at McGregor.
Okay.
It's not a Title I school like 3 of our other schools.
So I would like to thank all the site councils and principals for doing such an outstanding job, and move that we approve the proposed single plans for student achievement for each district school.
I'll second, and I appreciate Paul giving the thank you. I ditto that.
So, shall we have a vote? Do we have all ayes on this?
Yes,
Everybody agree? Aye.
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 Great, thank you. Next item is item 8E, approve the resolution, California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting. You have a staff person, Alan?
Thank you, Vice President Maris. Staff recommends the board approval for Board Resolution 2013-14-35 to opt into California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act guidelines, along with 880 other public agencies, including over 300 school districts.
Comments from the board?
As I understand it from the background information, we're already basically doing all the work we need to do for this, and there's no real downside to it?
Yes. It just allows more flexibility based on the amounts of contracts, and it allows more. It still requires board approval of all contracts. It still requires the district to make the best value or approval of best value bidders. However, it just reduces the timeline so that immediate concerns regarding facilities can be addressed.
Great. Thanks for bringing this to us.
Thank you.
So I'll move Board Resolution 2013-14-35.
I'll second.
So the board, do I hear ayes from everyone on the board? Do we get an acclamation here?
Acclamation.
Yeah, we're fine. Aye.
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 Thank you. Next item. Item F, we have pulled, so item G, approve the independent contractor agreement for CAS inspection. This is for 7 modular classrooms. Do you have a staff report?
Yes, and this is for the inspector of record for the modular classrooms. This contract that's being brought forward is in line with projections that were in place for the budget.
Comments from the board? Comments from the public? Bring it back to the board.
I'll move the independent contractor agreement with.
Could you come to the microphone, please? I really can't hear you.
Where are those modular classrooms going to be placed?
I still didn't hear you, sorry.
She asked where the modulars are going to be placed. Well, this contract doesn't specify that. All this contract specifies is who will inspect the installation. So I don't know if that's.
They are projected to the 4 for the middle school and 1 at each elementary school.
Jim? Yeah.
So this sounds like these are the portables that have not arrived yet and that they've not been approved yet. And I would certainly advise that we not take any action on this at this point until we've looked at all the other issues that have been brought up around this.
So if I could clarify for the board and for the public that the purchase or the agreements for the contracts to rent the portables have already been executed and approved by the board. The current schedule for the prep work is to begin next week.
That's my recollection as well. So we've actually purchased these
Rented, well,
portables
we've
already.
contracted to rent them, yes, not purchased.
I mean rented them. And we've signed the contract, and I remember the board approving these.
And the term of the agreement is?
It's for up to 3 years.
And that we can opt out if
There is a termination clause in the
there is a termination clause, and that is?
Yes, there is a termination clause. However, there are fixed fees that would be required to be paid regardless of the duration that we have the portables.
For the removal and the installation? Yeah.
Correct.
So I know Board Member Black mentioned that he's had a conversation with the new superintendent. So if the new superintendent decided to go in some different direction, then what would be the repercussions?
There would be a cost to the district. I don't,
It would be
a cost to the district.
Sure.
I don't have an estimate on what that might be. I don't know if Alan does.
The cost to the district, based on all the contracts that have already been approved by the board, would be just over $350,000.
Not including these contracts?
That actually is including these contracts, so the cost without these contracts would be close to $300,000. It'd be like $280,000, $290,000.
And that's for 7 portables for 3 years?
Correct. That's for 7 portables, 3 years at the middle school and 5 years projected at the elementary schools, as well as the architecture work to drop the plans and the electrical work that was already approved by the board.
So 4 of the portables are the ones that are going to be placed at the middle school? Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So if at the end of a year we decide, and we have discussions on this AM/PM issue, and we decide to change, we would not pay for the last 2 years, but we would have some extra charges to remove them.
Yes.
So there is an opportunity to at least reconsider during the next year. Is that correct?
But I think it makes sense for us to go ahead and approve these because we have to have the work done for the middle school. So, and you're talking here about $300,000 has already been approved. So then this is about $50,000, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so the $300,000 is for the installation, the site work and the installation?
The total $300,000 incorporates the over $100,000 of it is the installation with William Scotsman. Another $100,000 is the rental portion, and the remaining $100,000 is the electrical work and architecture.
Okay, so the question is, if we decided not to install them, we would still owe all of that money, or is there?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing in question would be the rental portion of $100,000.
Okay. So the AM/PM question is not on the agenda, but the question of the portables is, so that sort of brings that into play. And you know, I've seen some of the emails going back and forth, and some of the answers from staff. And we've only really heard from one of the elementary schools to this issue. And I think it might have been you talking about equity issues, Marcia, and you know, that if we did something with a program at one school, we'd have to do it with the others.
Well, I'm researching that. It's been brought to my attention that there are districts that have different models at different school sites. So I know that it has been an issue in the past here, but I don't know that it's against the law. Especially if other districts have different models at different schools, it would appear to be
Well, I think that can be decided, I mean,
Right.
we shouldn't discuss it now because it's not on the agenda, and there are obviously a lot of ramifications related to that, including all the stakeholders that would need to be involved in that process. So I'm just thinking that this work has to be done
Yes.
at the middle school. And we've already approved
Yes.
that work, and so we need to approve these, because this is just the finishing of that work.
I
And it's
agree.
a small amount of the money, or, thank goodness you're here to, clarify for us what we're doing, Mr. Garzo. So,
And at this point, 350,000, losing $350,000, that's a lot of salaries.
yes, but now, today.
Today, we need to do
We're
this, yes.
deciding on $50,000 approximately worth of work, and we need to get it approved so that you can proceed forward, because we want those portables ready at the middle school.
So that sounds like a motion, which I'll
That,
second.
okay, that is a motion.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Okay, so it seems like as far as getting the portables, the train has already left the station. How long they'll be there, that's still open to.
I guess the question that comes up is that when I first became aware of the portables going in, I immediately brought this issue through the labor relations to our superintendent and said, we don't want the portables. We want to go back to AM/PM kindergarten. I was not aware of when the board was going to make a decision on this, and I was deluded to think it was 2 weeks ago. And I guess the question is, how can I better stay in the loop? I can't pretend to come to every single board meeting, but somehow this, through working with labor relations, it sounded like this was already a done deal in some way, because we kept getting the same answer, no, 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 you're not going to be able to go back to AM/PM, forget about it.
Well, the board and new superintendent are having a board retreat in July to get acquainted, to set ground rules, to get to know each other. And I think one of the major items that will be discussed is communication. It's a board retreat. There won't be public comment, but it's an open meeting, and you can certainly come and observe. But in any case, that's certainly something that has concerned us, and that we want to be sure with the new superintendent that communication is better than it has been. It's been something we've discussed for a long time, and it's something we're still concerned about, and clearly there have been breakdowns in communication, and we don't want that to continue.
It was pretty much the number one concern in our search for a new superintendent. It was very clear that was the kind of person we're looking for.
So did the board then have a public meeting before 2 weeks ago about this whole issue
Yes.
of portables? Okay, that did happen, okay.
It was brought to us many months ago by elementary
Months and
school
months ago.
parents and teachers that they needed more space, and the AM/PM concept didn't come up in the beginning.
The board made that decision in November.
November, yeah.
Yeah, there was a packed board meeting with parents and teachers telling us that there was a crisis, and we needed to respond.
Thank you. More comments?
There's a motion and
Do we have a motion or more comments?
I think the motion has been made.
Okay.
Why don't we do
Second?
that, and then I'll make a comment of clarification. Let's finish the
After
motion.
the, okay, we have a second?
I second.
Okay, can we hear from the board? By acclamation, or did everyone?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
And then,
So, comment?
yeah, just a point of clarification. I actually checked with Board President Knight, and in a posted meeting, because the meeting between the new superintendent and the board members is a posted meeting and is open to the public, there will be a period for public comment. However, we cannot comment on anything that is not on the agenda. So just a point of clarification, because I asked.
Thank you.
Right.
Next item, independent contractor agreement, Battalion 1 Fire Protection, external fire alarms.
This is basically exactly the same issue.
Right.
So I'll move we approve this independent contractor agreement with Battalion 1 Fire Protection.
I'll second.
Comments from the public? Bring it back to,
We'll take it as a given you have the same comments on this one.
well, no.
This work has to get
How
done.
does the board vote?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item. Approve lease agreement for the Berkeley Albany YMCA at 1216 Solano. Do we have staff?
Staff recommends the approval of the lease agreement with the YMCA, Berkeley Albany YMCA at 1216 Solano. This is an agreement that has been approved and established since 1996, and it's a 5-year agreement with a 90-day notice of provision to terminate the lease if either party chooses to do so.
So I have one question and one comment. Number one, it says consent, and it's an action item. Number two is, there's been discussions on and off for many years on, and we're talking about space at the elementary schools, of using that site. And there were plans to use that site for housing. There were plans to tear down that site and build more classrooms, offices for administration. If we're going into a 5-year plan, and this issue comes up again, which I think we really do need to, as a board and as a district, look at using that space for the needs of our students. We can back out of this agreement?
90 days.
Yes.
90 days. Okay.
That was an excellent question, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to remind the board that that building is not Field Act approved, and we cannot put children in it. We can put adults in
No,
it
but we
as
could,
restricted.
we could build a new,
Children in it.
you know, we're building a new, great, we could put, yeah. And it also concerns me that the YMCA is putting children, it's something that we couldn't.
Right.
Our laws in California are very interesting.
I know, I know.
But I thought his point was really well made, because we are really space impacted. And, you know, in the future, if the facilities bond passes, or if we have additional
Yeah, if we
monies.
have the money.
I mean, even if we could just tear it down and put some nice-looking portables, you know, a new place for the portables, then, you know.
We'll put the portables there and not on the
Or
playground.
double, we talked for a long time about the what are those things?
Two-story portables.
The two-story
Right.
train things.
The containers.
Right, the
Containers, yeah.
containers.
Growth point.
Right. So,
But we were this close to actually putting up apartments for
Yeah.
teachers on that site many years ago, before, I think I was on the board, but I don't think anyone else here
Yeah,
was.
we were.
And, you know, putting in offices, I mean, we still don't have a really solid plan for the district offices yet.
yeah, so that was, I thought that was very wise. It's like you sort of forget that you have that extra piece.
And that would certainly solve the elementary, or some of our space problems, so I'd like to keep,
it's just
you
a
know, keep
question
that
of
on the
money.
burner, but then, you know, the issue of, you know, there's gonna be a new board, and the memory is gonna be gone. But some of us might still be in the public and keep bringing it up.
Yes.
I know
So Alan-
I know Dave DeHart will.
Alan has told us that we can get out of
Yes.
this in 90 days. I think we need to also recognize, though, that the YMCA provides an incredible amount of services to our youth, just as our school
Yeah,
district
no doubt,
does.
no doubt.
So there is our
Right. A lot of daycare there.
daycare, youth
Yeah.
and
Badly
government.
needed by the
A
families.
lot of families depend on that program.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if there was a facility that could do
So-
all of that.
It's more a political issue than getting out of this than it is a cost issue.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the YMCA provides a lot of different things for our students.
So,
Right kind of building, maybe they want to go into a partnership with us.
any comments from the public?
I mean, while he's going up there, like I said, those growth point, you know, double layer, I mean, it could be that we could maximize the space. A little space, we could just fit the Y and daycare and, you know, more,
Marcia's office.
yeah, right, Marcia's office, everything in that space.
What happened to the plans that were being driven back when Dr. Wong was superintendent, along with Dave DeHart was driving this as well, to develop that space? Because it was going to produce more classrooms. It was going to give Cornell a new library. We were going to get a new NPR from it. There were all sorts of these wonderful things, and it just sort of seemed to fizzle away.
I don't think we ever had the money to do it.
We didn't.
Yeah.
I thought that they had come up with some financing that was going to be basically you have no risk in this at all. They were going to basically fund it. We would lease it to them for something like 30 years before then they
Yes,
would
there
take
was.
over ownership. There was some economic plan like this that had the district at very low risk at this at all.
I think that did not come through. I know that there was a lot of concern, like they initially thought about retail,
Right.
on the bottom. And I mean, look now, you can see that I keep waiting for something to open up next to that post office there, and it's just the economy kind of changed. And I think that their plan for that, which was this mixed retail idea, just wasn't economically feasible.
Okay.
But those plans are in somebody's, I mean, you remember them, and I don't remember the details because I'm getting older. But the plans are somewhere, and I think, I'd rather see it being used for the YN for students and for administration than, I mean, retail isn't selling that well on that block right now anyway, but somebody could dig those up and, I mean, I'd love to see those again because it sort of just faded. And there were some economic reasons, but I'm not sure that they were anything that was not sketchy.
Okay, I think it may have coincided with the huge downturn we had in 2008.
That's
is that the
right.
magic
That's
year
true.
when
That's
everything?
right.
I think that was when this, because at Cornell we were basically led to believe we may be different next year because we're doing construction. Prepare for construction to start going on next year, and then nothing happened.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No, and the issue for ATA particularly was, I mean, teachers can't afford to live in Albany, and that's something that Mr. DeHart was very revved up about.
Right.
That I remember because I worked with him, and we're friends.
Thanks for the discussion. I've been wondering about that as well. So if anyone knows, I think it was before you were even on the board.
I was on the board when those plans came up.
He was on the board
Oh.
because it was right when I started.
I
because
remember the discussions.
Yeah, and it's something, I mean, we started discussing it while I was still working at the high school, but, when it came to the board, that was...
We even talked about developing.
Because I remember a presentation that happened at the high school while I was still principal there. So, boy, I'll tell you, that's going back.
I remember there were similar discussions for the San Gabriel site in developing housing for teachers there, as well as more school facilities, maybe a district office. So
It's
there are a lot of
important.
plans that have.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, if a facilities bond comes through, we have some very valuable real estate. I mean, look at the property on Albany Hill. I mean, it just, but we don't have the
We have a
funds.
cap on our bonding, too.
One of the ideas that came up was selling that property, and then we'd have money to do other things.
Right.
The property on Albany Hill?
Yeah, it's a beautiful property.
Exactly.
Stimulated a good discussion here.
We're off.
You're stimulated. We're off, but...
We're off. We're
but
wandering around looking for money.
The item that, the thing that's come up continuously this year is institutional memory. We have to try to remember these things. It's like I didn't think about it until I looked at the agenda today.
Well, I will move that we approve the lease agreement with the YMCA.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next item, approve the independent contractor agreement for commercial industrial waste applications. Alan?
Yes. Staff recommends the approval of the independent contractor agreement with commercial industrial waste applications, also known as CIWA. They're a organization that has already partnered with StopWaste.org, which is a value partner for Albany Unified. And one of the big expertise that CIWA brings is their knowledge of the industry and their bidding and contracts and negotiations with the waste haulers. And one of the big things about this contract is that it will save money for the district, because one of the concerns is over the past 5 years our waste expenses have doubled. And so with this contract, it'll hopefully help relieve some funds for our district long term.
Great.
this is something that came up in the past as well and somehow died. And this is, I mean, it's cost, you know, it's cost effective for us. We give 50% of the savings to them. I mean, it's just, it's a no-brainer, and I don't know why we haven't done it in the
Good
past.
for the environment.
It's great for the environment, so I'll move that we approve this.
So I have a comment.
Yeah. But our new things,
other
we can have
comments?
a motion and still comment, so.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Oh, you've done good.
Yeah.
So,
You guys pounded it into me.
I served on stopwaste.org at stopwaste.org at one time.
Their board?
Yes,
Oh,
and
wonderful.
as a council member. And their function was to encourage and help local public entities to achieve these recycling goals. And they were supposed to provide these consultants as a part of their agreement. So I'm willing to try this for a while, but I think we need to keep in mind that stopwaste.org at one time was expected to provide the same services that CIWA was doing. Now, since I served on the board, I'm sure, on the stopwaste.org board, I'm sure their responsibilities have expanded, and they probably have way more work than they can do. But I'm a little concerned that stopwaste.org has not provided these services to us already, and they're allowing these expenses to grow as much as they have.
Is this the same group as?
I'm sorry?
Is this stopwaste.org that we're approving tonight? Or?
No,
No,
we're
we're
a consultant
approving-
to stopwaste.org.
Right, okay.
So commercial industrial waste applications, they have worked with stopwaste.org in the past. I believe in Alameda Unified is where they've been able to partner with them. However, one of the expertises that CIWA brings is not only the waste management and the recycling and best practices, but also just the kind of the business aspects of it to help let us see the dollars and save money.
Right, so we pay them nothing unless they save us money.
Yes.
Right.
Oh.
So our bills have gone from 70 to 140,000, something like that. There's a potential to save somewhere between 70 and 140,000. If we save 50, they get 25, and we get 50.
Right.
Or 25. We
There's no
split.
way we lose anything.
No, but we could maybe be getting these services for free from stopwaste.org and achieving maybe the same.
Did the city have a contract with, at that time?
I don't, do they?
We currently work with waste management for all of our hauling and
Right.
recycling needs. That's actually all I know about that. I'm not sure about any contracts with the city.
So I made a motion to try this out.
And I think we should, at least for a year, and then see what they can do.
No,
And
this-
then
what is the term
we
of
could
this
learn a lot
contract?
in a year that
1
we could
year.
maybe do ourselves, or maybe whatever's left over after a year, we can start doing ourselves.
So I'll second then?
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So that concludes our formal part of our meeting, the agenda part. We're now on board and superintendent comments. Superintendent, have some
I have a
comments.
few. We had successful graduation ceremonies
Oh, yeah.
from McGregor High School on Wednesday, June 11th, and at Albany High School on Friday, June 13th. I know board members attended. And the AMS promotion ceremony took place on Thursday, June 12th. And then we also had the promotion ceremonies at the elementary schools. So summer school and extended school year programs began yesterday, June 23rd, and will run for 4 weeks, ending on July 18th.
What was that for?
Summer school and extended school year, and they are located at the Albany High School and also at the Albany Children's Center this year. As you know, we have a number of facilities projects scheduled for the year, and we developed a number of FAQs, frequently asked questions, specific for each project, and then a general one, and those were posted on our website and sent through e-trees and on our Facebook page, and any other way Jackie could think of to communicate that information. As usual, the Board of Education goes into recess for July, although, we've mentioned, the board retreat has been scheduled for July 10th from 9 to 1 o'clock in the district conference room. And just a reminder to the public and our staff that the next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, August 12th. And a reception for our new superintendent, Valerie Williams, is planned for that meeting, as well as for the subsequent board meeting on August 26th. And there are some other activities around introducing Valerie to the community and our other groups. For the district office, the July schedule, the district office will be closed on all of the Fridays in only in July. And lastly, for any residents who are interested in running for the Board of Education positions, the nomination window opens on July 14th and stays open until August 8th. There is a link to the City of Albany available on our district website with all the pertinent information for today.
Other comments? Pat? Then Paul?
So the Parcel Tax Committee, who are members of the community who will be running the campaign for the November election, have the right to ask board members they can invite board members to attend informational meetings, and board members can attend and provide objective information on things related to the process. So I have been asked by members of the committee to participate in some informational meetings, and I'm sure that other board members may be approached too. But I do need to clarify that as a board member, that my role will be to that I cannot campaign, that I can't advocate, that I am there to meet with members of the community to provide information and clarification on issues related to the measure.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. One is, I guess there was an article in the journal about board members and the upcoming election. So just put it on record that I do intend to file to run for another term. Yeah, I mentioned that I attended the AMS promotion, the AHS graduation, and the Marin School promotion. And they were all wonderful in their own ways, and it was great to see our students moving on. I do have one comment on the AHS graduation. There was really no place designated for board members to sit. Alan and I ended up sitting in the last student row in front of the teachers. But I'd like to point out that it was a great place to sit. I'd like to point out that some of us are more than 3 times as old as the students who are graduating. And sitting on those bleachers for 3+ hours is very hard. So in the future, I would really request that some seating be provided for us, either with the teachers or something like that.
Duly noted.
Can I add to that, Paul? Because
Sure.
I actually made that formal request of the superintendent after the graduation of 2008. And so that disturbs me.
Well, okay, so it's out there again. And the only other thing that has occurred to me, I've gotten notice, I'm sure we all have, about the CSBA conference in December, which will be in San Francisco this year. We will have at least 2 new board members, and I think it will be very important that they attend training at that conference. I don't know, Jackie, if you can register people without names.
Oh, that's true.
Get seats for people who
That's
aren't
a new
already.
question I've never been asked, but I
Okay.
can
I don't
follow up.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
I don't know, but in any case, I do want to be sure that they have the opportunity to do that.
No, the training is
Absolutely.
very valuable.
Absolutely.
In the beginning.
Yeah, good
So I have a
timing.
couple of comments. I think they're related to previous comments, but I also attended the high school graduation, the middle school graduation promotion, and the Ocean View promotion. And they were all pretty exciting events. I'm watching those kids take the next step in their growth, academic and social growth. I enjoyed sitting where I did among the students and the teachers at the high school graduation. And then concerning the board retreat, there's an opportunity with the new superintendent. I would encourage citizens, parents to contact board members. At least I would like you to contact me about anything you want us to talk about the new superintendent in this retreat. It's going to be valuable for us as representatives of the public to know those things. And then I want to encourage citizens to run for those school board positions. Albany draws so many people to this community because of the schools, and we really need good representation, and I think having a reasonably healthy competition for those seats draws out the issues. You have to campaign, you have to speak to the public, you have to listen to the public before you get on the board. So I think having a good, healthy group of candidates for the board is important for the health of our community and our schools. So, any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ellen for getting us out of here early.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for helping me to survive.
Oh, you did an
You did a
excellent
great job, Alan. We really appreciate
Vice
it.
President Maris.
Okay, this meeting of the Albany Board of Education is adjourned.